Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the third largest bankruptcy in American history and what happens when a nuclear reactor goes bankrupt. This is part of my Save Thor News series, which I do monthly to pay my rent and my bills, and I'm now $125 away from making rent tomorrow morning, and tomorrow morning is a very hard red line. So if you'd like to contribute through my PayPal link to help me survive bringing you the hard news the media almost always avoids telling you, that would be wonderful. Only $125 away with 14 hours to go. Please, Jesus, send me the strength, and hopefully you guys can keep me running, because it has been a battle all the way. PG&E files for bankruptcy protection with $50 billion in debt. Do you remember California had the worst wildfire season in California history last year? And it turned out that PG&E caused the fire. That is weird. I mean, that's really weird. Well, that's what they said they caused a fire, but, you know, yeah, why not believe them? Whether they did it with direct energy weapons or just a guy in a set of matches, PG&E accepts the responsibility, which is really weird. And another thing that's really weird is they filed for a form of bankruptcy back in 2001, and then they did that corporate thing that they usually do where they split PG&E into two different companies. And if I understand it correctly, they split it into the company which has all the debt and the bad shit in it, and then they split it into another company that's really good and has all the good stuff in it. It's really horrible process. But since everybody's so fixated on abortion and walls and whatever else, racism, nobody ever has time to concentrate on how Wall Street has been kicking our ass since 2001, 2008, and it looks like we're in for the next round. And so the crisis in 2001 cost the state of California and PG&E around $50 billion. All right, and that's another thing, is you have to realize that no matter what company it is, no matter how much money they make, they max out the maximum amount of debt they can borrow because they can, and it's a limited liability corporation, so the employees are not on the hook for it. Technically, the taxpayer always is. And what's expected to be one of the most complicated bankruptcies in recent memory, thanks to the involvement of indignant state and federal regulators, activist shareholders, worried bondholders, and angry fire victims, PG&E has officially filed for bankruptcy. And this was brought to us about 5 days ago by Tyler Durden of the Zero Hedge Bitches. And that's where the term bitches comes from. Zero Hedge. It's a term of endearment. The Wall Street Journal reported that, as we previewed last night, the Trouble Utility, which serves 16 million California customers, filed for bankruptcy early Tuesday. And in my planetary angular momentum theory, we will see volcanoes erupt on the West Coast in the next 6 years. Claiming more than $60 billion in debt, facing what some analysts estimate could be $27 billion in fines, relating to the role of malfunctioning equipment in causing wildfires. The bankruptcy process is expected to be a protracted mess as state and federal regulators try to figure out what's the best plan for holding the country's largest utility accountable. So like you have your largest electricity utility firm go bankrupt, that has major implications. Let's skip down here real quick to the biggest bankruptcies. And you got Lehman Brothers is number one, and then WorldCom is number two, and then you have Pacific Gas and Electric Company. What's amazing is all these, the biggest bankruptcies in history are either, the top 10 anyways, are either banks or energy companies. Nobody has the ability to fail with such spectacularness as banks or energy companies. And here, PG&E becomes not just a fallen angel, but a failing angel, a term coined by Bank of America. Facing what some analysts estimate, I've already read that. When it's all said and done, the outcome is expected to have wide-ranging implications for utility customers, fire victims, shareholders, and wholesale power providers. Yeah, and that was another thing, is they stopped paying they'd started wildfires before, and so they were paying the people whose stuff they burned down, and when they declared bankruptcy, they stopped paying those people, which is lame. In the filing, the utility revealed that it's facing some 750 complaints on behalf of 5,600 fire victims, and fire-related liabilities amount to some $30 billion. Oops. That guy's butt is so big, when I touched the word, it hit his butt picture. Okay, that joke was bad. I don't like to make fun of people, especially not their physicalities. I'm not in perfect shape right now because all I've been doing is laying here making videos for 6 years. So all I do is work. Through PG&E was cleared last week of involvement in the 2017 Tubbs fire that tore through the state's wine country. Its equipment has been implicated in 18 other wildfires that burned through nearly 200,000 acres. Everything about this story is bad and weird, and just the limited liability aspect of it. You know, if it was like China and people went to jail for mistakes this big, I don't think mistakes like this would be made. I mean, technically, you could say that they'd even bought up the real estate and then set fire to it if you wanted to be conspiracy-minded. Destroyed 3,256 buildings and homes. So the company killed 22 people. It's like Spanish Inquisition shit, man, during the 2017 wildfire season. And investigators are still working to figure out whether PG&E's equipment played a role in starting November's Camp Fire, which killed 86 people, making it the deadliest fire in state history. The company's shares soared on news it would be freed from liability in the Tubbs fire, which reduced its potential liabilities by as much as $11 billion. While that's true, utilities rarely declare bankruptcy because of state guarantees. California's law allows utilities to be held responsible for fires caused by their equipment, even if the company wasn't negligent. PG&E previously declared bankruptcy back in 2001 thanks to the California energy crisis, which was caused by Enron. We found out that Enron was doing what they could to create an energy false scarcity shortage. You know? And that's the thing, is the poor people and the middle class people and even the lower class rich people have been spending the last 8 years, 11 years since the 2009 financial collapse tearing each other apart over the dumbest shit ever, but led around by the nose by the media, when clearly our economy almost came to a halt and exploded in 2008, and we didn't do anything about it. That's a problem. One thing is clear: the bankruptcy is bad news for Californians, who could face double-digit increases in their energy bills despite already paying some of the highest rates in the country. The consumer always loses. The bankruptcy could also be problematic for wholesale power providers like NextEra and Consolidated Edison, as PG&E is expected to try and renegotiate contracts to purchase wind and solar power after canceling some $34.5 billion in long-standing contracts. It could have a real ripple effect throughout the power industry, not just with respect to existing contracts that are there. It could have a chilling effect in respect to new investment. By declaring bankruptcy, PG&E becomes not just a fallen angel, that's not a good reference, a term used to describe Satan and firms that go bankrupt shortly after losing their investment grade rating, but a failing angel, a term coined by Bank of America indicating that a firm went from investment grade to bankruptcy within a span of a year. PG&E also joins Lehman Brothers in WorldCom, and it became only the fourth failing angel of all time, behind Enron, Lehman Brothers, MF Global Holdings, and PG. So it's just a bad sign, man. And the stock market is not the economy. The economy is many things. Before filing, PG&E rebuffed 2 rival financing bids, one led by Elliott Management Corp. And the other led by Citadel, that sought to help the company avert a bankruptcy filing. But now that the die has been cast, it's difficult to say whether what process the will take. It's difficult to say where the process will take PG&E. There are some bankruptcy cases that get finished very quickly, said Melissa Jacoby, a law professor. This is just not one of those cases. Some state officials have publicly mulled a state-sponsored plan to break up the utility, the country's largest. At one point, lawmakers have considered a plan to help PG&E pass on the fire-related liabilities to its customers. Oh, man. But reluctance to be seen as bailing out the utility ultimately killed the plan and led to PG&E trying and failing to call city lawmakers' bluff. The company is set to hire turnaround specialist James Mesterharm and the chief restructuring officer to help the company navigate bankruptcy proceedings. And so the other interesting thing is they own a nuclear plant, man. In 1957, the company brought online Balacetitos Nuclear Center, the first privately owned and operated nuclear reactor in the United States. And remember, nuclear power was supposed to make electricity so much cheaper. That didn't happen. And then PG&E began another nuclear facility in 1968 at the Diablo Canyon Power Plant. And so, man, they have at least 2 privately owned nuclear reactors. So what happens when a privately owned nuclear reactor goes bankrupt, or the company that owns it does? These are interesting questions, man. And hopefully I will get to continue to ask them, because hopefully you guys can, I think we've only got $125 left to go by tomorrow morning. So hopefully you guys can make some contributions to my PayPal link to keep up the glory and awesomeness that is Thor of Thor News, as I try and bring you the truth and the news in an inspiring and comedic way that the main media doesn't really ever want to talk about. So I'll leave a link in my information box, and hopefully you guys will stay cool and say some prayers for me, and we'll make it through these hard times. I love you guys. God bless everyone, and may the force be with us always. And let us live long and prosper together.